So here we are at the main event with a checklist for a successful job hunt. First, check your appearance, particularly if you have not been on interviews, been on networking opportunities for the last 3 years. You need an update. The least expensive, best way to do that is to hie off to the tailor at your local cleaners and say, do these things fit me properly? It is not about whether they are fashionable. It's not about getting a pop. It's about fit. That is the most important thing. Do the lapels need to be taken in on your suit? Do your ties need to be narrowed? Does your skirt need to be shortened? Only a tailor can tell you those things. And that is the least expensive way to do it. Do not put yourself in the hands of a stylist who will make you look current, but not in a good way. Second, we need to collect our contacts. You can do this with Outlook. You can do it on 3x5 cards. We don't really care. The important thing is, in order for you to get, within 3 to 6 months, 400 contacts, 8 to 11 live job openings, 8 interviews, 6 to 8 interviews, and 2 to 3 offers, you absolutely must have a contacts list. You've got to start adding people. You've got to take off the people that aren't going to be good contacts for you. You need to update your profile on LinkedIn. If you do not have a profile on LinkedIn, go follow the instructions, tell as much about yourself as is appropriate, and start collecting people who connect with you. The best way to use LinkedIn is to make a list of companies in which you want contacts and see if you know somebody, first, second, or third degree contact in any of those companies. The most important thing to remember is there is no such thing as a useless contact. People will spend hours, days trying to scheme to meet the CEO of a company to talk about marketing. The CEO of the company doesn't know anything about marketing. That is not what CEOs are about. The head of the Department of Marketing would be much better as a contact. Someone at the advertising agency who's involved in marketing. So when you think about contacts, it is not the high level that we're interested in. It's the people with true knowledge of the areas that you are wanting to have contacts in. Plan to make 40 contacts a day. What does that mean? That means that every morning when you get up, after you've brushed your teeth, you will go sit at your computer and you will send email messages to 40 people you have not contacted a day. You have not contacted before. You will then go back to yesterday and see who didn't respond and recontact them. Why are we doing this? Because job hunting is a numbers game. People who make 3 contacts on Monday and then rest on Tuesday are going to be unemployed for a very long time. I have lots of clients who will say, oh, but I did 40 on Monday, and then I did 3 on Tuesday, and I took Wednesday off. No. Relentlessness is what gets people the jobs they want. It is not superior qualifications. That's always an asset. But there is nothing that has the power of relentlessness in a job search. In the end, they hire you because they can't think of a better way to get rid of you than to bring you on board. If you are going to use search firms, here are the rules. Search firms usually retain search firms, which is what you want to use, have exclusives with different employers. They don't overlap. You need to be making about $100,000 a year to be of interest to a search firm. You send your resume to all who recruit in your field. You do not try to build a relationship, get an interview. It's all going to be keyword search until they have a job opening that your qualifications suit. Here's the problem. They do not deal with career changers. And let me tell you why. The person who hired the recruiter said, wait a minute, I am paying you 33% of the first year's salary plus bonuses, and you are bringing me a career changer? Does that mean that you couldn't find someone who's had exactly the experience I want, I need a different recruiter. If you're going to change careers, you've got to network your way in, which is why we're talking about networking. If you're going to do more of the same, search firms are certainly one of the options. But I want to remind you that they're not the only option. You cannot send your resumes to search firms and then rest. You've still got to do all of the networking, all of the making contacts that everybody else does. Oh, it didn't switch. It's one thing to say, I have a lot of contacts, I know a lot of people who will help me, but the real issue is what kind of help do you need? You need to use your contacts correctly. And one of the ways to get nothing is to ask people, do you know of any job openings doing X and Y? Because that's not the way we store information. I may have heard of a job opening last week, I can't remember who told me, and I can't remember exactly what the job opening was. So I'm going to hesitate before I give you a name. But if you were to say to me, here's what I'm interested in, who should I be talking to? You've now tapped into the way I and everybody else in the world stores information. I will give you the names of people that work in the field that you're interested in. Some of them may be high level, some of them may be administrative assistants. Try to remember that if you could get the admin to the hirer to put your resume on top of today's agenda and mail, that would be about the best thing that could happen to you in real life. When you ask, who should I be talking to, what you're really saying is, do you have an email address or a telephone number for this person? I prefer the first contact to be by email. And it should always be, I understand you may have an opening for an X. I'm an X, and here's why. Mention how you got the person's name. It really does help. If it's someone I know well, I'm going to talk to you regardless. If it's someone I know less well, but is somebody I consider credible, I'm still going to talk to you. It is the best way to get to speak to someone. Now, here's a sort of a tip, but I think it's the most important thing in the world. When you get on the telephone to talk to anyone, a contact, a potential interviewer, whatever, stand up, project, express your energy. Do not sit in your comfort chair, your ergonomic chair, designed just for you to be comfortable, and expect to come across as positive, enthusiastic, and someone I really like to have a full-fledged interview with. When somebody says, I just want to ask you a few questions, it's showtime. That's it. We're now going into an interview. And you have to treat each call, each opportunity, as if it were a full-blown in-person interview. When we talked about clothing and getting your clothing fitted, the other thing to remember is you must dress in appropriate business style. There is no casual in the interview process. I don't care if the person interviewing you ultimately is wearing Friday casual, khakis and a shirt. Not for you. You are dressed in a business suit. The other thing to remember about contacts is you have to thank them. It isn't that you go back to the well 5 times and then you write one thank you note. After each contact, what you want to do is to send an email saying, what happened? If I'm going to be interested in your search, you have to keep me informed.
So we had a question from one of our participants, and they wondered if you're contacting maybe 40 people a day about jobs and networking, but you're currently employed, how do you keep your employer from finding out about all of your networking?
If you're currently employed, you can't do 40 a day. You've got to do them on your lunch hour. You've got to do them from your cell phone outside. You cannot use the office computer, your computer at work. You've got to bring your own, which is the way employers find out that their employees are job hunting is because they see them using their own computers during the day. You're going to have to be discreet, but here's the good news. You can do this. Remember that I don't have to answer an email or a phone call right then. You can leave a message. You can send out all of your contacts for the day at 6 a.m. And then you can wait and respond to them in the afternoon or at lunchtime. You don't have to ever get caught in the office doing anything that's untoward. And these days, people are so sensitive if they think you're job hunting, particularly if you're one of their stars, and they're going to get upset. That is why you never put on your LinkedIn profile, I'm looking for a new job. Do not do it. Everybody has a LinkedIn profile, but that does not mean you give away that kind of information.
And so I think that brings up a follow-up question. What if you are networking within your field and you're keeping it private, doing your own email at home and things, but how do you keep maybe like some loose lips from letting it loose that you're currently looking for other opportunities?
One thing you would always do when you're networking with people in your field is to ask them to keep this confidential. And they will usually do that. Only someone who is a really evil person would call your current boss and say, hey, so-and-so contacted me and wanted to know about openings at the company. It's always a risk, but remember that if your boss said to you, you have to say, I'm always looking at opportunities. You do not have to say, yes, I am. And your boss is going to know that that's the fact because I'm going to give 7 come 11 that your boss is also always looking for opportunities. Anyone who is not in perpetual job hunting mode right now does not get the picture. Which one do I?
Oh, just click on the slide. Yeah, and then you there.
Here is the hierarchy of contacts. In other words, if I were to assign a percentage of getting information from people, this is the hierarchy. People in your preferred industry. One of you sent in a question saying, I want to get into consulting, how do I do it? You start networking exclusively with people in the consulting business. You use your alumni contacts, you use all your business contacts to find people working in consulting, and you get in front of them. And what you are looking for from people in your preferred industry is 3 things. The names of the stars. What is the trade press that most people read or are interested in? And by the way, this is a trick, but it never fails. You read a profile of someone in a trade publication. That would be something like Ad Age or Industry Week. You send them an email saying, I read that profile. I thought it was really interesting. You will get a response because that individual believes nobody reads the trade press, and that indeed he or she would have to send it to his or her mother to be sure that mom saw it. So using the trade press to find people in the industry is perfectly okay.
So one person asked if you could speak a little bit about searching for work in the government industry, if that might be different, how things might, you would tailor your search.
Sure. Can I put that off for 1 minute and just go down my list here? If you wanted to work in the government, you would have the same hierarchy of contacts because while there are all kinds of employment offices and stuff for the government, you can't know if that opening is what we call wired. That is, someone has already been selected, but they have to do a good faith search. And you want to avoid that because that's an emotional roller coaster. So people who do what you want to do are the second hierarchy of contacts. Your counterpart at a competitive company is more valuable to you than practically anybody else. You need, again, to find those people and talk to them. And what do you say when you get them? Hey, I understand you and I are sort of colleagues, but in different companies. I'd love a chance to talk to you about what you really do and maybe see how what we do is different, each from the other. People who work with and for people like you. I cannot tell you how important admins, that's what used to be called a secretary, admins are in as gatekeepers and in getting you in and helping you to meet the people you'd like to meet. Imagine that you are an SVP in a bank, and your admin controls everything. She controls your calendar, she controls your meetings. She meets a job hunter and says to the boss, you know, you'd really like to meet this young woman, this young man. Do you suppose for a minute he's going to risk the SVP alienating the most important person in his work life by not meeting with you? That's a simple enough request. You want to get on to know people like that. How about people who know your work or reputation? They can be very important, very influential, because the fact that they know what you do and how well you do it makes them advocates, not just contacts. Finally, there are the people motivated to help you. How on earth could they be motivated to help you? How about the fact that over the years you have helped them, that you have offered contacts, that you have, in other words, been important in their career? Those people will work harder for you than any of the others. They will find someone in your preferred industry because they remember how much help you were to them when they were job hunting. Always keep in contact with those people. You have no more motivated advocates than people you've helped in the past. I wouldn't be doing the right thing for you without talking to you about job hunters' follies. Many people think it is a good idea to go for information interviews, and they will wring favors out of the reluctant to get to talk to somebody and pretend that they're not really job hunting. This is a mistake. Do not do it, especially if you are looking for work in the not-for-profit or the government, any government segment. You would want to make the contact with people that you knew there as honestly as possible, which is to say, here's what I'm looking for, how can I be useful to you, and do you know to whom I would send a resume? Straightforward is better, honest is better. There's no substitute for honesty. Don't ask people to make calls on your behalf. Do it yourself. You are your best advocate. If you want to get someone to call and say, hey, I have a friend, he's going to be sending you an email, that's fine, but not phone calls so much. And here's the distinction. Phone calls, people feel they need to answer. They don't feel they need to answer emails. So you've put two people on the spot, your friend who made the call and the person to whom he or she made the call. Don't do it. Make direct contact. Now here's something that can be a huge research help to you. Every company in the country, and not-for-profit, of any size at all, has a public relations department. And every public relations department has bios on the top people in the organization. If you want to know what the background is of people doing the job you want to do, the easiest way is to pick up the telephone and say, call the company, ask for the public relations department, and say, do you have a bio for Joe Smith? And they're going to say, absolutely. Do you want it snail mail or email? Any bio of anybody in any company is the person's career path, where they went to school, what kinds of jobs they've had in the past. This can be very helpful, and I'll tell you why. People will say, you know, I know that I would really be good in that particular company. And you have an accounting background, which is not a crime in most states. You're a CPA. If you went to the website or to the PR department and got the bios of all the top people in the company, you would see that every single one of them came out of a sales or marketing background. Is this really going to be a good target for you? Wouldn't it be better to find a company in which people with your background had moved up? The third thing that I want you to think about is this. We're not asking people for favors. we are offering them an opportunity to be useful to you in exchange for you being useful to them down the road. Never position something as a favor. Always position it with, if you help me, you know I'm going to be here when you need my help. 20 years ago, people would laugh at that idea until the Great Recession came along and some of the other economic disasters of the early 2000s. And now most people understand exactly what you're saying, that you will be useful to them if they can help you out in this case. Ask everybody. They don't need to be friends. They can be pure acquaintances. You may have many friends that can't help you at all. That doesn't make them less friends. It simply means that for this kind of activity, in this context, they can't do what you need done. What about HR? Everybody sees human resources as the enemy. Do not do that. Don't think about that. What you need to think about is, how can I be useful to this organization, and how can I explain it so that HR, when they see my cover letter, will absolutely pass me on to the hiring manager. Okay? Here's what needs to be in that cover letter. And it needs to be in a covering email as well. Number one, I understand you have an opening for an X. I'm an X. Do not go into, I have long admired. I used to have a friend at Kraft who worked on the macaroni and cheese account, and he had a dartboard, and he would hang up letters from people who said things like, I've long admired your cheese and macaroni advertising. No, I have no time for this. Start out. I'm an X. I understand you have an opening for an X. Second paragraph, as you will see from my resume, and then pick out 4, not more than 4 things you've done that support the job you want. Why are we doing this when the resume is going in the same email? Because resumes and cover letters are fated never to be in the same place at the same time after they've been printed out, which everybody over 50 will print them out. Third paragraph. The best way to reach me is, that's it. It's 3 paragraphs. You do not send 3-page emails with a 3-page resume unless you want to be unemployed forever. And I'll tell you why it's important. When people say, but I can't explain anything in just 3 paragraphs, what I say to them is, you're not focused. That's exactly what we've been trying to get you to do, is to focus. Tell me 1 compelling reason, 2, 3 at the most, why I should hire you. What are you going to do for me? That's what I want to know. I don't want how you discovered my company or why you think this is a wonderful thing. And when you coach your contacts, someone said, I'll make a call for you. I know somebody at XYZ. Don't just say, oh, thank you. Say, here's what my research would indicate they want. So when your contact says, well, why should I talk to this person? What you need to say is, well, he's done a lot of work in this field, and give 1 example. All we want to do, and all a resume can do, and all contacts can do, is to get you face-to-face with someone who can hire you. That's what this is all about. It's not that I think someone is going to say, oh, this is the person I've been waiting for. It's not going to happen. This is not Match.com. What we're doing here is playing the percentages. We're trying to get you in front of enough employers that one of them is going to have a job that is important to you.
So we did have a question about the cover letters. If your cover letters are so focused and short and concise, how can you put in a little extra flavor to help stand out?
The cover letter is a transmittal letter. If you had 1 sentence in there saying how you decided you were interested in the company, 1 sentence, fewer than 12, 15 words, that's okay. But what we're really trying to do is to get into the keyword search. The reason we repeated stuff from the resume and the cover letter is so if they're separated, there's still enough in the cover letter that you'll go through the first screening. You don't need to worry about standing out. Time for that later. What's important is that you get into the keyword search part of the resume screening. What is the hidden job market? Okay, I hear about this all the time, and Richard Bowles and What Color Is Your Parachute talked about it. All these people talked about it. It is those companies that you don't know and would not ordinarily think about contacting. Only, again, only the trade press in your chosen field can give you the names of companies you've never heard of. And when you email your resume to companies that you don't know, you are moving into, for you, what is the hidden job market. Second, I would join several job clubs, but I would pre-screen them before I joined. I'd go for one meeting, and if these people sit around and have pity parties, don't go back. The last thing on earth you need is people who are undermining your resolve and your confidence in yourself. The reason I find job clubs useful is remember that you are only looking for one job. Therefore, someone else's rejected opportunity could be your dream job. This is like trying on shoes. If you go into Nordstrom's rack and you try on shoes and they don't fit, do you say, there must be something wrong with my feet? Or do you go back and start again and do the next 20 pairs? So the job clubs are like trying on shoes. They have to fit you. If people say, oh, it's really a great group, and you go there and you feel depressed when you leave, never go back. My third hidden job market is find your former coworker. Remember back in '02, you had a summer job at a company and you kind of liked the company, but then you went back to school and you moved on. I'll bet some of those people that were at that company are now somewhere else. The hidden job market. Some are probably still there. Look them up on LinkedIn or Facebook and contact them and say, hey, remember the summer of '02? You and I were out on the loading dock doing X or Y. That person is thrilled that you remember him or her. How can anybody be insulted to know they were remembered fondly 8 years later, 10 years later?
So we had one question about clubs. How do you find a job club?
Most of the job clubs have either email addresses or sites. I'd Google them. Chicago job clubs and see what kinds of things you get. There are several that are well known. I would contact Fourth Presbyterian Church, which, by the way, takes everybody. This is not about religion. I would contact the Job Center at Old St. Pat's Church, which is very active, and ask the question, do you have a job support group? When does it meet? How does it work? I am not a fan of clubs that only deal with a certain slice, like people over 50, because I find that younger people are as good for job leads for older people as vice versa. I say be totally democratic and go for a job support group that is active and busy and thriving. Don't forget your association. If I'm in marketing and I'm looking for a job in marketing, wouldn't it make a huge amount of sense for me to go to the monthly meetings in Chicago of the American Marketing Association? Or if I were in New York, of the New York Marketing Association? Think about it. This is a natural place for you to meet people. And remember, we talked about this before. You are not going to go in there and glad hand them and act as if you're trying to get elected to something. You're going to ask a member of the hospitality committee to introduce you to some of the members. Do not put yourself, you're already vulnerable as a job hunter, do not put yourself in a place in which you feel that you're on trial or you're on display or something. It's not a good idea. It'll just make you unhappy, so don't do it. Okay, let's talk about interviewing. There is no topic that causes people more pain, more angst, more agony than interviewing. Let me reduce it to its lowest common denominator, and we'll go through it. There are 4 parts to an interview. The opening, which is 2 or 3 minutes, is chit-chat. Did you have any trouble finding us? Did you have any trouble finding a place to park? My goodness, it's an extremely warm day, isn't it? Anybody can get through that. This is not brain surgery. All you have to do is say yes or no and act interested. The second part, the body of the interview, is question and answer. This terrifies people. Oh my goodness, they could ask me anything. Well, yes, anybody can ask anybody anything, but if somebody says, if you were a tree, what tree would you be? Feel free to say, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Because if you say something like, oh, I would want to be an oak, then I know you've prepared for this, and the whole thing was silly. I was asking a silly question, and you gave me your answer. I say, deflect the question. Answer in a straightforward subject-verb-object manner. Tell me about yourself. Instead of starting with, I was born and reared in Russia, Ohio, I would say, do you mean professionally? And then I would talk about my job. You have to be an active participant in the interview. You are not a victim. You are not sitting there. When somebody says, what's your greatest accomplishment? You can, again, say, well, as you can see on my resume, several of the things I've done that I'm really proud of are, and then describe them. In other words, answer the question in a way that reflects well on you, but gives information. A lot of times people will try to put out there some building leaping accomplishment. You know, if you've got one, it's fine, but it's not really necessary. What the interview is supposed to do is to test 3 things. Can you do the job we have to be done? Second, can you do it at least as well as the people we've had do it in the past? And third, is this a fit between your values and our values? If you want to look at what causes more job failures, it is not lack of competence, it's lack of fit. In other words, you instinctively dislike the people you meet at the company. Then that's an important piece of information. You aren't going to be happy working there. Or when you think about their reputation, it's not a reputation that appeals to you. Then why are you there? What you want to do is to find out from them what their values are, how they have treated and rewarded people in the past, what their expectations are, very practical things. You will, when you get further into the interview process and you're meeting fellow employees, that is, people who would be your coworkers, you'll have a lot better idea of whether there is a compatibility factor there. Okay, the Q&A goes on forever. It always seems to go on forever. And you answer all their questions, and finally the interviewer wears down and says, is there anything you'd like to tell us about yourself? Finally, we're at the piece of the interview we call the sell. It's showtime. Sit up, look the interviewer in the eye, and tell them what it is that you would bring to the party, what it is you want to do for them. Tell them, I was so interested when you were talking about your research capacity. I love research. Here's some of the research I've done. In other words, you get to say what is most important about you. You can go on. You can tell them several things as long as they all relate to the same point. You can't say I'm an X, a Y, and a Z. You got to stick with one thing. Finally, we come to the part that's really important, at least from the HR and prospective hire point of view. I always get this at meetings. People will say, well, at the end of the interview, the interviewer didn't say, or the interviewee just sort of got up and left. That means the interviewee didn't do the close. What is the close? You look the person straight in the eye and say, I'd really be interested in this job. I think I could do it well. And I do think the company is one I'd like to work for. In other words, you have to show some interest. You can't just say, well, thank you for the interview. because the interviewer is as concerned to find a fit as you are. We don't even get to money, we don't get to anything here unless you express a basic interest and a specific interest in the job as described. There aren't going to be any more interviews. They're going to decide that you really aren't that interested in what they're doing. Now, before you even ask the question, I know that some interviewers are abominably rude. They take phone calls. They're obviously doing solitaire on the computer while they're talking to you. My friends, this is important. This is not an isolated incident. A company that allows prospective employees to be treated badly by anyone in the company is not a place you choose to work. It's only going to get worse. It never gets better. Remember that the interviewing process is like a rush party. I'm on my best behavior, you're on your best behavior, and we're trying to come together here in this little dance. If I'm behaving like a swine, you really need to say, do I want to work here? I don't think this is a good fit, because HR is the absolute onomatopoeia of top management. This reflects their taste. And if they feel they're so wonderful that they can afford to be anything but lovely to the people they interview, you don't want to be there. I know that's something you could argue with, and you could say, oh, it was just an isolated occurrence. Doesn't really matter. My friend, that's not true. It does matter. The way you're treated is your only indication of how they would treat you on an ongoing basis. Don't just dismiss that and say, oh, it was a fluke. Now, if you are really that wild-eyed and optimist, go to the next interview and see how you're treated then. But I would say they're on trial. They're going to have to prove to you that that was an isolated incident. You're not going to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's how people sell themselves into dreadful jobs and are unhappy. If the interview was beyond terrible, to the point of being illegal, where someone asked questions that were completely inappropriate. Are you married? Do you have children? Are you straight or gay? Anything like that. My technique for that is not to make a fuss then, but to send a letter, a real letter, not an email, to the CEO of the company saying, this happened to me in an interview with your company. Is this your policy? If you don't do it, people get away with all kinds of really terrible things, and it means you didn't do anything to make it better. You have to stand up for what you believe in and for what's right. I haven't heard anyone asking questions such as, do you have children? I'm a married woman for some time, but that's an industry-specific thing. It could happen, and you need to be aware that that's not kosher. All right. Now we come to what is everybody's favorite topic of discussion, salary negotiations. Let me tell you, there is only one thing that is going to get you the salary you want, and that is you have better information than the people that are trying to hire you. You cannot get more money than you got on your present job if you change careers to a lower paying field. If you go from accounting to acting, you're not going to get the same salary. Our only goal in the salary process is to get the going rate. That is the market rate for the job you want. Google, Association Salary Survey, networking can give you that information. Now, do you think everybody on the other side is playing the game fairly? Absolutely not. How many times has a career changer been told, yes, but you're changing careers. We can't pay you what we'd pay other people to do this job. Wait, wrong. They have to pay you the going rate because they've already agreed that you can do the job. We don't get to the salary part of the negotiations until it has been demonstrated on both sides that you have the qualities, the characteristics to do the job. No, you didn't lose the connection. I want you to think about this. Never even contemplate working for less than market. And I will tell you why. You're on the job 3 months, and somehow you find some information, I'm going to let you decide how to do that your coworker in the next cube who's doing exactly the same job is making $20,000 more a year than you are. You are going to be suicidal. And when you go back to your boss and say, you're paying me $20,000 less to do the job than anyone else, the boss is going to say, we asked you what you wanted, and that's what you said. No, do not do that to yourself, because you'll be out of there. You'll be out of there in a month. You will not be able to do that job knowing that the person in the next cube, who is not one stitch, one iota more competent than you, is making $20,000 more a year. Go for the top of the range. When you do your research, all salaries are quoted in ranges. Under $50,000, it's a $10,000 range. From 50 to 300, it can be as much as a 20% difference. So at 300,000, the range would be 250 to 300. Over 300,000, salaries are set by how much do we have to pay to get the job done. So knowing that there's always some give in there, you are going, when asked, what kind of salary are you looking for, you're going to respond as a range, and you're going to put the least amount you would accept at the bottom of your range. I'm looking at 100 to 120. The range is 100 or 90 to 120. So you put yourself up there in the range. You can always come down. You can never go up. If they offer you 120 and you say, oh, I'd rather have 140, no, it's not going to happen. Finally, you must treat yourself like the 7-cow bride. In Africa, there's a tribe in which it is the policy for men to buy brides, and the brides range in cost from 4 to 7 cows. There was a young man of the village who fancied the chief's daughter. He went to the chief and said, I will give you 7 cows for your daughter. And the chief said, not wanting to marry his daughter off to someone who was insane, she's not a 7-cow bride. She's maybe 4 or 5-cow bride. The young man said, Chief, you do not have the picture, much less the frame. If I pay 7 cows for your daughter, she will be treated with respect all the rest of her life in this village, because no one would ever believe that someone would overpay. They will assume that she has a beauty they can't see. When you get your recording, replay this story until you are convinced. Do not undersell or do not put a lower price on your value. If you do, you will be miserable, and it will take you years to bring your salary up to market. And here is the gypsy's warning. If your salary is more than 20% under market, employers will always, always believe not that you were underpaid, but that you're underskilled. Because if you had had those skills you claim, you would never settle for 20% less. So save yourself an infinity of pain and don't do it. If someone says to you, well, that's ridiculous, you're asking for X. No way. Then pull out your salary research and say, well, now I've surveyed 15, 16 companies for this level job, and this is what they pay. This isn't about you. You are not putting a value on yourself. That's why when somebody says, what salary are you looking for? You do not say, I want, I think. You say, market for this job in this area is X to Y, and I expect to be paid market for my work. Everything I've told you so far, you can ignore everything I've said, but you cannot ignore my rules on salary negotiation. You have to go for the last dollar that you can get out of these people, and the reason is not greed. And if that's your equation, we're not going to get along here. It is not greed. It's called positioning. If I have an Armani suit, it hangs on its very own padded hanger with space around it in my closet because it costs $5,000. My Gap outlet jeans, I feel free to kick under the bed anytime I want because they cost me $24. You want to be the Armani suit. You want to be the 7-cal bride. If you come in to an organization, to a new job, and they spent the earth to get you, they will treat you better. That is why it is so important to fight about money. And it is important, if they absolutely won't give you the money, to walk away. It takes courage to do that. But it's also just common sense. It's not really courage. It's like you're saying that I'm worth less than I think I'm worth. I can't do it. I can't go into a new job where I'm expected to perform, where there's going to be lots of overtime and late hours. I can't do it for less than the market rate. If you stick to this, if you do not allow yourself to think about their buying you, and therefore you have a dollar value, you will do so much better than anybody else. This isn't, by the way, a gender issue. In case you think women underprice and men don't, my experience has been that they do it about equally. And it's all about putting your ego on the line. If you see that this has nothing to do with your ego, that this has to do with the market rate, you'll be able to do this. It's not going to be a test of your self-worth. Look, think about it this way. So, I'm up on North Michigan Avenue, and I go into Neiman Marcus, and they have a couple of things there that I really love, but they are priced at astronomical. One of them is $2,000. And I say to the clerk, that's ridiculous. It's not worth $2,000. Do they say, oh, for heaven's sake, let me lower the price? Or do they call security and say, take this woman and dump her back on North Michigan Avenue and don't allow her in here again? You got to have that attitude about money. Otherwise, you will underprice yourself, and that means you're going to be poor in your old age, and you know we don't want that to happen.
So we had a question about finding salary information regionally. So what would be your recommendation if you're having trouble finding regional information for a specific industry?
The way I would do that is I would go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I would get the cost of living index for the region I was interested in. So if I knew that in Chicago the salary was $100,000, but the region that I was interested in said cost of living was 10% lower than that, then I would use that number. And when I talked to people, I would tell them. That's the most important thing. You can name any number you want and negotiate from there if you can explain how you got that number. You can also go to regional salary surveys. There are regional salary surveys. You can get to know some headhunters and ask them. You can get to know other kinds of recruiters. You can ask a friend who works for a company in Chicago what that company's branch, what the difference would be between the branch here and the branch in the area that you want to go. You've got to use 3 or 4 sources of information. Don't just rely on one. But whatever you do, when somebody says, oh, that's not true, you have evidence. You can pull it out of your briefcase and show them. This is where I got the information. For many interviewers, particularly hirers, it's a tactic to say, oh, we've never paid anybody that much. Well, I can show you that other people are in fact getting that amount of money based on my salary research. So that's why it's very important to do the salary research before you go into negotiations. People always want to lie about what they're earning. I feel this is really creepy, but I know it happens. Okay. If asked, tell the truth about what you're earning now. Why would I say such a thing? Because roughly 70% of employers, before the deal is done, will ask to see last year's W-2. Now, there is no way that you can explain that your company made a mistake on the W-2 and you didn't get it corrected because the IRS is out there hanging in the bushes, the ultimate gorilla. And there, if you underreported or they underreported, so anyway, don't do it. Tell the truth. And remember that when they say, oh, well, then you should be happy with the $10,000 increase, you're going to say, that's not true. One of the reasons I'm leaving this job, much as I love it, is that I am being paid less than market, and I can no longer afford to work for less than market. If the offer is too low, say so. Say, obviously, never be rude to anybody. It's not even worth it. Don't even contemplate it. Don't be outraged. Say, obviously, we're not talking about the same level job. The job that I've priced and the one I thought that you wanted to hire me to do pays X to Y. It's so much nicer. It leaves the other side able to raise the offer. And by the way, if they decide that you're only worth X to them, but you believe you're worth Y, you don't want to work there. This is not going to have a happy ending. You're going to be miserable. Never leave money on the table. Okay. They talked about signing bonuses. They talked about benefits. Did you ask to have your association dues paid? Did you ask to go to the annual meeting of your association and to have that included in your salary? Or as one of the perks you're going to get? Did you ask about continuing education courses? Always ask for more than you think they're going to give you, because it puts them on notice that you're going to want more as time passes. Why surprise them? If they know going in that you expect to do some master's work, or you expect to be sent to the conference once a year and the regional meeting of your association, then if they decide that's not what they want to do, you know it up front. Mostly association dues get included. There's a budget for going to meetings. And the other thing about that, if they don't want to send you to any meetings, if they don't want to pay for any development, do they need to spell that in for you? Or can you maybe envision that out there? So all these things come up in salary negotiations. And the most important thing is, do not hesitate to tell them what would make you happy, because if you are not happy in the job, they and you have both wasted a great deal of time, effort, and money. And so it becomes very important that you are upfront as you can possibly be. As you go through salary negotiations, you are going to become more detached. And that is really good. The more detached you are, the more you see yourself as selling a service, the more you see yourself as Neiman Marcus. You want this goodie, it's X thousand dollars. The more rational your decision making will be. And that's really important, because I've experienced with clients that they got some fabulous job offer with a lot of money, and instead of thinking, what are they really buying, what am I really selling, they thought, wow, if I get that kind of money, it's fabulous. And they were miserable, and they were out of there in 3 to 6 months, and we don't want that to happen to you. This has got to be a rational process. It can't be emotional. Oh, I just love the company. It's so beautiful. Okay, so visit periodically. That is not the reason to take a job.
So we're down to our last 5 minutes. So we have a couple of questions. One question regarding salary is what to do if you're interviewing for multiple roles. If they're not clear with you about what role particularly you're interviewing for, how can you do that research and be specific?
You're going to need to research the different jobs that you've applied for or you are applying for, and you need to be upfront with them that this is market for one particular job, not market for you. Remember, we are pricing jobs, not you. So if they say, oh, but you were willing to do that for X dollars, yes, but that's a completely different role. These are not interchangeable.
Mm-hmm. Now the next question is a little bit off salary negotiations, but one person on the line said that they had been advised to take contract work to be able to get their foot in the door of a dream company. But they were wondering if that was really a smart strategy for a mid-career person as opposed to maybe a more junior person. Is that still a good strategy?
I think taking contract work is always a good strategy. It's a good strategy for a retiree because It allows you, with no obligation on either side, to make money, to see if you really like it. In fact, now of course this can't happen. I wish so many of my clients had tried contract work before they went to work for the company, because once they were there and found out the true demands and they saw what they were expected to do, they were pretty disillusioned. It wasn't as much money as they thought. If you decide after 3 months of contract work and they make you an offer and you decide, well, yes, I would or I wouldn't, you've still made money in the meantime. So I think it's a good strategy.
And our last question for this session goes back to the beginning, so the informational interviews. This person is looking for a little bit more clarification. Should you be doing informational interviews? Should you be doing them with people as a potential employer, so not necessarily your closest contacts or people that you would feel comfortable reaching out to, but can you get connected to people at the company and do those before you're really ready to interview or to really know that you want to apply?
I would do information interviews in the industry with companies competitive with the company that I was interested in. But you do need to be careful, because if someone says, hey, it's showtime and we're interviewing you for real, and you're not prepared, you're not going to do as well as you would had you been completely prepared. So that's the danger. You don't want to put yourself in a spot where you have to fly by the seat of your pants, because that is not a winning strategy. So I would say no until you are fully prepared. Then you can do some information interviews in the company knowing that you've covered yourself.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the second session of our three-part series. We will be sending out an email to you that has links to this recording as well as a link to a survey so you can give us some feedback. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Same time, same channel, same everything. But we look forward to seeing you again to wrap up the last part of the job search for the mid-career professional. So thank you so much, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks.